Thank you, Aura, so much for that presentation. I just want to make sure for everyone, for anyone has any questions about any of the presentations or have questions for any of the panelists, we're going to have a panel after we're done with our next two presentations. Feel free to ask them in our Q&A section. There you go. Perfect. Okay, so next up, we are going to have Dr. Roxana Marishi. She's going to be doing a presentation on student data privacy and emerging technologies.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you, Senator Leyva, for a wonderful introduction as well, and Aura for that great starting us off with all the AI background. So I'm going to get the slideshow going here. All right. So I'm going to be talking about emerging technologies and AI in education, and I changed the title a little bit to kind of talk about this, the way that the marketing doesn't always match the reality. And so a lot of these things are going to be marketed as innovation, innovative. And some of what I found in my looking at these emerging technologies over the years is that many things that are labeled as innovative are actually exploitative. And maybe at the end we find out that it's both, it's both. I'm a professor of education at San Jose State University. I teach educational psychology in our teacher education department, and I teach education policy in our doctoral program in education leadership. What I'm going to be talking to you about tonight, some of my research and kind of intersected with some of my activism. The views that I'm presenting here are those are my own and not necessarily the position of the CSU, the SJSU, or the Lurie College of Education. We need to separate some of that in order to protect academic freedom. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about have to do with a lot of technologies that are, frankly, extraordinarily powerful in our society and contributing a lot of funding to in policy and practice as well, and in our systems. So some of my early work was looking at school violence prevention and the effectiveness of programs. I was in grad school at the time that the Columbine shootings had happened. And so I had to take an evaluation lens to see what actually works. Like, do we actually know that this thing works or not? And so how can we spend our dollars wisely to ensure that what we are investing in is actually effective? Some of what we found is that the marketing does not match reality. And early work was on bullying prevention, so looked at power differentials and repeated harm against those with less power. And if we look at the extraction of data and how lucrative it is in our day and age, information is the new gold. It's the new oil. It's like diamonds. It's worth trillions of dollars. If you control that, you control wealth, you control power. This is a quote from the Kill Switch documentary. This was kind of mapping the origins, the early days of the internet. And if you look at the companies that hold market, the market share, this is 2021 compared back down here to 2005, which was not that long ago. You see this massive increase of the power and the funding that these companies have amassed. Except for this oil company here, it's all big tech. These are the powerful folks in our society right now. And so that's going to have implications for our communities. So these systems are so opaque to us that sometimes we don't even know when we've been denied an opportunity because of an algorithm. It's a quote from Coded Bias, the Shalini Kantaya, the director of that film. So we've heard a lot in the media about social media and data concerns. We've heard a lot about Facebook and Instagram and making sure to protect privacy of consumers. We haven't heard a lot about educational data and the need to protect students and student data privacy. And so this is where my area of concerns are, and I really just want to shine the light on student data and the hidden ways that emerging educational technologies are extracting massive amounts of student data. And the concern is, if it's going to be longitudinal and those same data harms and predictive harms that we know have already affected so many adults could then now start at a very, very early age and affect children throughout their lives. So with learning management systems, big idea here is that the technology is moving faster than the legislative protections than we can even put in place to enact protections. Learning management systems are kind of the backbone where a lot of these online programs are now being delivered. Even in-person classrooms still use learning management systems. Canvas is one of the large ones that I've studied. They use artificial intelligence. They're boasting about doing experiments on youth, nudge experiments. We should be concerned about that if, Facebook is experimenting on people, but we need to really protect the young from these kinds of things. Virtual reality is entering our classrooms at a rapid pace. They're trying to legitimize it by saying that, you can be in this field trip on this cardboard, on this VR device. You don't actually have to go to the actual location. So they're even taking away opportunities for students to engage in actual kinds of learning. Some of the problems that, again, never mentioned in the harms is it's biometric extraction, metadata, so the ways that the students are interacting with the technology. And then facial recognition, we've heard a lot in the news about facial recognition AI. It's also embedded in many of our online systems. Online proctoring, remote proctoring is extremely troubling and problematic. They're flagging students. Some of the companies are giving labels about with suspicion scores based on what happens in the background. If a toddler walks in, the student stares at the wall too long. If they have a tic, any kind of a thing can set it off and falsely identify a student as cheating. In higher education, there's been many attempts to raise awareness about this and to get universities to cut their contracts, but we haven't heard anything at all in K-12, and some of our standardized tests that are being, quote, required also use these same kinds of remote proctoring tools if they're being done remotely. For the most part, attention has been primarily in higher education. We need a parallel focus to protect young children and youth from longitudinal exploitative data practices. I'm going to be publishing these slides and I'll put them all in this short link. I'll include it in the chat afterwards. So one of the newest emerging technologies is blockchain digital identity systems. Some of you might have heard of blockchain in the cryptocurrency space. So Bitcoin is based in blockchain. A lot of the digital passports and IDs and things like that. If you're being sold a digital wallet, like keep all of your official documents on a digital wallet, that is on blockchain technology. And in education, in a sense, it makes sense as far as it's going to be appealing to get your transcript easily on your phone instead of having to deal with a transcript office. This is how it's being sold. It's going to include badges, micro-credentials, certificates, stackable credentials. It's going to document proof of skills. So far, so good. Student identity verification, all of this fine. And then there's tokens. There are going to be tokens as rewards for task completion to basically say, if you've done this thing, then you're going to get this reward. That's a little bit more problematic with gaming and digital labor. We're seeing it come up in some of the spaces around the gaming. And then payments via cryptocurrency. The issue with blockchain is that on its own in each sector, it might sound like a good idea. But when you have an individual and their educational data, their health data, their voting data, their financial data are all on an individual on a blockchain, and it's distributed and it's accessible and it can never be deleted, and that's part of the structure and architecture of blockchain, then it's really problematic. I'm just going to show you a screenshot from one of these proposals for, the future of education, Internet of Education. Web 3.0 is what a lot of the blockchain and crypto spaces are in. Education 3.0 is sort of this next web of Internet of Education with these documents to try to verify what students have done. This is a really troubling screenshot. I almost don't want to show this because I don't want this screenshot to be associated with me. Other than that, I'm trying to raise the alarm that if we do not understand these things, this is what's going to be the future for our children. We have this beautiful little black baby here growing up into this beautiful black woman right here, and being tracked every step of the way with these digital wallets, with all of this information, with assessments, immunizations, school transcripts, and there's this attempt to try to make this all digital. I think we really have to pay attention to what's happening and recognize there's bills across the country right now that are trying to push, digital IDs, and this is globally and everything. You might see some protests around it. It's a complicated space to be in, but we really need to understand why there's so much resistance and concern about these digital IDs. So Big picture, apology model of data extraction. The companies collect as much data as possible, and then if there's an outcry, they respond with an apology and try to walk back the most egregious policies. How am I doing for time? I'm just curious.
Got about another 5 minutes.
All right, I'm going to go super quickly then. All right, so there has been a lot written in education around the concerns. Again, the marketing of the innovative wonder of these programs does not match the reality. Oftentimes they come in with promises that are not delivered. And I call it the Theranosing of education. And so you see, again, innovation really becoming exploitation. Student privacy laws do not protect kids right now. FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights Protection Act, has a bypass so the ed tech company can be designated a school official. And then that ed tech company has full access as if they are a school official to any of the students' data. And we are trusting them with a pinky promise when they say with a student privacy pledge that they're not going to take the data. Over 300 companies, ed tech companies, store their data on Amazon Web Services. We haven't even touched the big data space around how they're going to be ending up using this data. The Markup is one of the media companies that's done some exposés on these very recently, January of February of this year, and last year, the higher ed one. And this is looking at private equity firms that are purchasing many of these ed tech companies. Some of them, Power School, for example, is claiming to be reaching 45 million children. So this is a really large issue that has been ignored, I think, in society. And then finally, in college and career, it's going into these predictive analytics as well. They're buying and selling companies. Who knew it is doing this risk analytics to try to predict who's going to be at risk. And they say that it's to support supportive services, but we don't know if that label follows that child and then gets into these risk algorithms to where they are labeled at risk and they're not given an opportunity later on because of a past label. That's going to be extraordinarily problematic. And I've seen over and over again the language of early warning systems to try to alert the systems to who's going to need the most help. Who knew it was purchased by a company called Power School that was in that expose. Big picture, there are a number of data harms. Aura had outlined many of them. Big one is discrimination. Another one, again, is the risk scoring, all kinds of things that we've seen. And then how is this happening? How is it that it's happened so silently and we haven't really picked up on it? It has been through the process of privatizing our public services. We have to also recognize that this is the back door through which they are extracting many of these different kinds of data. So if you're looking, familiar with the social impact investing space, public-private partnerships, oftentimes that's just code for privatization. There's been a lot written critically in academia. What we don't do enough in academia is share it out with the public. So that's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. It's privatizing of evaluation research. So you get a third-party entity to put a stamp of approval on something that's going to make them money and also make money for investors. There's some very serious problems around potential pressure for the outcomes. Finally, privacy protection narratives. Who's going to come with the solutions are those who are going to actually profit from those solutions. So it's the same as asking an oil company to come with the environmental solutions. We have to recognize that that's happening with blockchain. Blockchain is going to come and say, own your own data. You're going to be able to own your own data and turn the permissions on and off. There's evidence that it is not as secure as we think it is. And again, if you cannot delete things, it's problematic. I know I don't have much time left. So I'm going to go quickly through this. That social impact investing is really about pulling data to try to determine who's going to be, quote, at risk. So then a tech mediated solution can come with an investor bringing in money to test that out. And if it's successful and they can set the bar really low for success, then the investor gets their money back from public tax dollars and they get a return on investment, claiming that they've saved the public money because prevention is better than, letting things happen. And so this is the logic we have to listen for in the bills. I have highlighted here the early literacy. A bill came up last year. It was halted. I think there's another one coming this year around dyslexia risk, right? If we don't do serious examination of the screeners that come and say, oh, we're going to screen children for risk of dyslexia, not diagnosing and getting services, but early risk, this is the kind of thing that we're going to see is untested, something that has facial recognition, something with eye movement tracking, promoted as AI based, and then saying that it's going to be able to identify people at risk for other conditions as well. There's a huge profit motive in a lot of these things. The US Department of Education is talking about putting student records on blockchain. They have a whole page dedicated to it. And unless they start to talk to people with critical perspectives, they're going to have the ear of the industry folks who are pushing this as a solution. Again, this is what it looks like from pre-K all the way up. You see these badges, skills, the same kind of things that Facebook was trying to take from us on social media. They're going to try to do this. It's going to be under universal pre-K. We have to take a close look at some of these things and put some guardrails around those early initiatives. SEL is involved. SEL and AI is going to higher education. I know I'm out of time now, but this is what we're seeing. Again, these big 5 traits that Cambridge Analytica, frankly, was like, it's dust now. Right? Cambridge Analytica is nothing, is because of the whistleblower. And then here we have in higher education, the same 5 traits being measured can be weaponized politically in the same way for ads. And yet it's just going under the radar. No one's paying attention to it. The privatized initiatives for the social impact investing are going to come with smart contracts on blockchain, and I think I am really out of time, so I'm going to go. And I'll be glad to post these slides up and do any kind of a follow-up if folks are interested. But really, it's 3 layers of exploitation: democracy, dollars, and data. And the NAACP has worked very hard over the past 5 years, on a number of education-related resolutions, but specifically around data justice, to prevent data exploitation. And this is the one on opposing the use of blockchain digital identity systems as a requirement for receiving public services. Glad to share more. I don't want to take any time from our other speakers. And I just wanted to thank you all for your attention. I'm glad to connect and leave it at that. Is that good? Did I do it in time? Did I get it?
You're absolutely within time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
No, there's so much. This is like 10 years of stuff I've tried to sift into 15 minutes. So thank you.
No, it's perfectly fine. And like I said, there will be, let me get this off you. There will be a window of opportunity for us to do a follow-up after this. So people be on the lookout, check your emails. We'll be able to blast out this information for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So, and then I just want to say space for our next guest speaker. We're going to have Ms. Mashika Allgood, AI ethicist and founder of All AI Consulting LLC. She will discuss AI literacy and effective computing.
Okay, hello. My name is Mashika Allgood. I am the founder of Ally Consulting. I know I should always say it. I never say it, but it's Ally Consulting LLC. So I'm going to start by posing 5 questions that will help flesh out the need for and benefit of AI literacy in our communities. So when people discuss AI, it's always in aspirational terms. They're always talking about what the technology will be capable of doing. And according to them, that list is limitless. AI will be the best of humanity without the worst of humanity. But in all that hype, you never really hear folks talking about what AI can actually do right now in this instance. So the AI systems that are affecting our lives every day, how do they work? Underneath all the bells and whistles, AI is just a system for looking for patterns and probabilities in data. It just does it faster and with more data than we can because computers. So when we talk about AI from a what we actually do right now standpoint, it's with an understanding that we're talking about computers doing statistics. Given that understanding, the key question in AI ethics is what types of decisions are being made, in what areas, and most importantly, how. The simple answer to that last question is patterns. What you see on this slide is a representation of the core functionality at the heart of AI, the hidden simulation or hidden representation. When you create a model to classify cats, the learning process is essentially the model creating an internal representation of a cat by breaking the image down into various features. So those are the little dots, mapping those relationships between the features, those are the lines, and then weighting those features based on their importance. Those are the numbers. So the cat on the left becomes the cluster of weighted features that you see on the right. AI does that for every entity it encounters in the dataset. Each entity becomes a feature cluster, like what you see on the screen. Put all of the feature clusters together from the dataset, and it creates an internal representation of the world. Well, the part of the world the system sees, which is whatever version of reality is presented by the training data. So when you use AI on new data, the system is essentially comparing the new data to this hidden representation, what it determined the world looked like from the training data set. And it resurfaces whatever patterns it found in the training data, right? So this is what a cat looks like, based on what I know. It has these eyes, these ears, or whatever. So when I show it a new cat, a real cat, it just basically says, does it have these eyes, these ears, whatever, right? So it's not looking for something new. It's trying to find its pattern. And if it represents that pattern, then that's the answer that it gives. So functionally, at its core, AI is discrimination. That's its job function. Its job is to classify people and entities into groups and discriminate in favor of the groups that were treated the best in the data set. So when I'm looking at cats, right, I'm going to weight features higher that I see in most cats. If I rarely see a cat with red eyes, then the AI system is going to say, well, cats don't have red eyes. Things of that.
Looks like we have a technical issue. Everyone, if y'all would just be patient and give us a second, we will try to troubleshoot. Okay, everyone, it looks like we may have lost Mashika for a brief moment. I don't know what happened with her internet feed. I will.
I did try to text her, and I think she may be still presenting. I'm just not sure how to reach her right now.
Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and troubleshoot for just a minute. If not, we'll go ahead and move forward.
Hey, Rob, while you're troubleshooting that, why don't we move to some of the questions in the chat, or let's move to the next presenter so there's not any wait
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do that. I got to get it off of our screen. Give me a second, please.
Let's give you some help.
Okay.
Hey, Jewel, go ahead and grab, if one of our other panelists can
go.
grab the questions, or if
I-
Jewel.
I could answer one of the questions that came in, if that's all right, from Adam. And
Absolutely.
the question, so one of the things, and I wish I didn't have to go so fast, right? So the question, it's a great question. So do you disagree prevention is better than letting things happen? So let me just emphasize, I am a prevention researcher. I absolutely support prevention, high quality, full prevention, something that we know is actually going to work. What I'm concerned about with the privatized initiatives that have been coming in is that they're not tested. It's not something that we know actually works. It's a pilot. And because the metrics are set to be simplistic and very easy to game or easy to make, they can try to claim that this thing works, like, 3-year-olds going to being 6-year-olds and then all of a sudden being kindergarten ready, if yes, many kids will be kindergarten ready, but so is it the intervention that worked, or is it that natural development was happening and then investors are making money off of that natural development? So there's some concerns around the methodology. So I'm not against prevention. I think the prevention is extraordinarily important. It's around the evaluation and the metrics and the double exploitation of our communities. Because ultimately, if something doesn't work, we're paying public taxpayer dollars for it, and our communities aren't getting what they deserve in terms of true prevention. Then that's what I'm trying to raise awareness about. So thank you for the clarifying question. So yeah, I'm in support of prevention, very much so. There's another one. Should I go to the next question while we're waiting, or is Mashika back?
Feel free to go ahead and go to the next question.
Okay. Can a school district and community college force a student to have their camera on Zoom? No, I think the answer should be no. And I am aware that early on in the pandemic, when things shifted, people were not aware of privacy laws and that you cannot force someone to, have their camera on. I know there's variation across instructors, but for the most part, the best practice is to allow for students, if they want to be camera on Zoom, they can be, but that they should also have the choice to have the camera off. That would be the most honoring of privacy for students. And I know that there's variation, and I don't think everyone adheres to that. Good questions.
Well, perfect. Actually, I do not believe we're able to get Mashika back on. So this is just a perfect segue. We're just going to go ahead and move on to our panelist discussion. We're already going through some of our questions already, but I did want to leave space for Ms. Revenor to come on and just introduce herself and talk a little bit about the work that she's doing. And yeah.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Sneha Ravanor, and I am the founder and president of Enco Justice. an international youth-led organization working to mobilize students for human rights and democracy in the age of artificial intelligence. Our network has expanded to over 300 students in 40 plus US states and 25 plus countries. And I'm actually from San Jose, California. My first campaign was working on California Proposition 25, which would have expanded the use of biased algorithms in our state's criminal justice system. And so it really did all have local roots. And now we've expanded to become an international organization. So we definitely do tackle issues ranging from facial recognition technology to deepfakes to all these other manifestations of biased AI. And, we do so through policy, advocacy, research, organizing, and education. So I think that one perspective that I do provide is that of youth who are getting engaged in issues of AI ethics, because I think that our generation is finally waking up to the realities of algorithmic injustice, and we're finally taking action and using our voices to try to elevate change. So I think that I'm happy to be here to be able to megaphone the concerns and input that youth have in the space. And I think that all of the panelists here have been doing amazing work in the field of AI ethics. So I'm honored to be able to join this panel.
Perfect. Thank you. So actually, our first question is going to come from Brother Abdi. He said, beyond the moral and ethical problems, what is the initiative to fix the biases that are due to the creation of these algorithms? So examples include Twitter's racist cropping algorithm that chooses white faces over black faces, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think the first step to actually correcting bias in algorithms is, moving towards a more diverse workforce. So I think that what we're seeing right now is that the tech space is, unfortunately very homogenous. I think that it's predominantly white men. And I think that when you don't have diverse people with a seat at the table, they can't actually have their, perspectives and their input translated into concrete decision making. And so I think that we definitely have to build actually meaningful diversity pipelines to actually engage people from underrepresented backgrounds to enter the tech field and actually get involved in AI ethics and to actually get involved in the tech world. And so I think that unless we are able to break past those glass ceilings, we'll continue to have, a very homogenous tech industry that isn't able to call attention to some of those algorithmic harms. So I think that one overarching change that we can enact is actually working towards promoting diversity in the tech space. But I also think that there definitely are some, technical fixes that we have to use. So for example, in the context of facial recognition technology, one of the main reasons why we're seeing, pretty staggering rates of algorithmic bias is the fact that in these training data sets, the faces that are being used to train the algorithms are, predominantly white and male. And so obviously, if you're going to train an algorithm on a data set that skews towards one particular demographic, it's not going to learn to be accurate on all demographics, and you're not going to see that actual inaccuracy play out until it's being deployed in a real world setting, in which case it might actually lead to wrongful arrests or to other civil rights violations. And so I think that we definitely need to be diversifying training data sets and to be making sure that we are more inclusive in our development process. And I think that, again, that all stems from having a more diverse workforce that is able to bring those sorts of issues to the fore and that is able to actually prioritize those considerations. I think that, in large part, I think the issue of unethical AI, I think one large driving factor behind that is the fact that we have this inordinate emphasis on efficiency and accuracy in AI development, and we don't really think of ethics or equity or fairness as, vital concerns. We see them more as afterthoughts and things that we can consider after we've already developed an efficient or, accurate algorithm. And so I think that we definitely have to sort of shift our thinking around AI development, because unless we actually attack the issue at its roots, unless we actually begin to see, ethics and equity as, valid end goals that, scientists should be just as concerned about, I think that we're not going to actually be able to, address some of those underlying psychological issues that have underpinned the algorithmic injustice that we're seeing around the world today.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else on our panel wants to chime in?
I'll jump in. Piggybacking on what Sneha, I hope I'm saying it right, is saying this leads kind of the work part of the work I'm doing is more in the AI literacy. So I just think it's important for those of us who do understand it to educate those who are in the community, because it does give you a form of recourse. So say, for instance, you are, say, wrongly accused of a crime you didn't commit because of flawed facial recognition algorithms, you can push back, on the police force. Like, what is the system you're using? What is the accuracy rate? What was the data set? How did it explainable AI, how did it arrive at this decision? So I think because they call it the black box of AI, where no one understands or knows how it works and how it arrived at its decision. So then there's just nothing you can do about that. And so right now I'm teaching a course at University of South Florida in Tampa called The Social Impacts of Artificial Intelligence. And so I'm being able to teach young people who haven't heard any of the things. So it seems like some fictitious world, but these things are happening like every day. But even being prepared, like I really look at jobs, someone had put in the question about the pre-screening, which is called ATS, application tracking systems, which increasing numbers of companies are using. And so if we have to prepare not just our young people, but all people, like this is the reality of what jobs are now. So most likely you will be talking to an algorithm for an interview before you actually meet a real person. HireVue is one of these softwares that actually collects 25,000 data points from your tone of voice, how you're sitting, the words you're using, if you're using, eye contact. And then it gives you a score of how good of a fit you are for their company. If people don't know these, like in some cultures, direct eye contact is disrespectful. So people could be missing out on jobs because of bias in these systems, but they're not aware of it. They might think there's a person on the other side when it's just computer code.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to pass it on to other panelists as well, but I do have two quick examples that I do want to raise. So I think that, for example, in the context of facial recognition technology, which seems to be, a very hot button issue in this realm, I think that, one thing that I find really shocking is that two of the men who were wrongfully arrested because of a false match stemming from facial recognition technology, Niger Parks and Robert Williams, I believe, they were actually considering taking a plea deal when they were wrongfully arrested, at the hands of facial recognition technology. And I think that stems from the fact that there isn't AI literacy, and because people aren't aware of how these systems operate and how to actually hold these systems accountable. There's no, clear line of accountability or no legal recourse for them to actually correct or challenge the results of these biased algorithms. They're actually being pushed towards taking plea deals for crimes they never committed, and who knows what impact that could have on them long term. And I think that that's just, for me, when I read about that, that was just a gross and flagrant injustice, because for people to be being pushed to the extent of taking a plea deal for a crime they did not commit simply because they don't actually have the awareness or the resources to challenge these algorithms, I think is like a staggering indictment of the state of AI literacy today.
Great comments. I'll just also add that I think that there's diversity within the AI ethics and data privacy community around what should be done. So there's going to be some folks who are saying, let's diversify the data sets to make it more accurate, to make it better and more precise. And there are some who are saying, no, it's unethical, ban it. And so there are some organizations, and I'm in the more critical kind of camp as far as it shouldn't be, we should not be using this. This is actually not helpful. It's actually doing more harm than good. So there's Fight for the Future is doing some work to try to gather activists and folks to ban facial recognition. I think that again, it's complicated stuff, and I know that there's some attempts to try to say it's going to increase, safety and things like that. But I think we have to also recognize that we're building massive surveillance infrastructures and the work that we're doing, especially when these systems combine. So it's not just going to be facial recognition, it's going to be facial recognition that's connected to automatic license plate readers, that's going to be connected to, all kinds of other things to try to do real time. It's just a whole nother space of AI surveillance that we have to also recognize is predatory and violates our Fourth Amendment rights. So I think it's interesting. I think as the AI and ethics, data privacy ethics space emerges, you're going to see a lot of different responses to some of these questions. I do know that within the tech community, there's been quite a strong uprising among workers within the companies that are saying, we're not going to build this oppressive tech. Like Amazon workers were saying, no, we will not build this. We will not be participating in anything that's going to be harming our communities with AI systems and things like that. So it's just something I'm inspired by that. If the rest of my presentation was a little bit depressing and not looking forward to these really dystopian futures, I think I'm inspired most by folks who are just saying, nope, I'm not going to build it. I'm not going to contribute to this. It's one of the reasons I want to educate around blockchain and the harms of blockchain, because right now all I hear is hype. Well, actually in the crypto space, there's enough people calling it out. But even NFTs is on blockchain right now, and people are saying, look, this is just a scam. And so we have to recognize that these are complicated spaces, but a lot of these systems are deeply connected as well. All right, other questions?
So one of the other questions that we have, if schools and colleges have many third-party online forms for submissions, why is it that some third parties don't allow you to remove your data? For example, your phone number.
Well, I think it's the nature of privately managed companies being able to do what they want to do. The complicated part, again, is that they're partnering with public entities. And so it makes those of us in the public systems powerless to be able to do anything around protecting our data if we're handing it over by necessity to a privately managed company who is saying we're going to do what we will with it. One other thing I'll add is that it's not always the content that they're interested in. Like with the learning management systems, it's not just that what are you posting on the discussion board? It's, did you turn in your assignments on time? How many late flags did you get? How are you interacting? Did you watch the videos that your professor put up? So there's metadata that's also valuable that can be bought and sold as well. And then there's the predictions. So they can say, we won't sell your data, but they can make predictions about you and they can sell those predictions. And so we need to have a host of protective legislative protections to prevent companies from doing these things. And then not just to say, we believe you when they say they're not going to do these things, but to actually hold them accountable and to have there be serious consequences should they violate those. The hardest thing is we also don't know sometimes how our data have been used, right, against us or weaponized. And so a lot of interesting. Oh, is Mashika back?
I'm crushed. I did the whole presentation to myself.
Wait, I texted you and tried to say we're frozen. So let's bring it back to the cat slide. Let's let her finish.
That was like slide 2. I don't know. We got you. Now I'm nervous. It's not gonna complete. So I don't wanna do this twice. So let me just try to jump into the conversation. Okay. So
there's actually a good segue question that might be able to help get you back in. So someone actually directly asked you, why is searching for patterns damaging?
Because you're searching for patterns within a finite piece of data or a finite data set, right? And so you're not learning. I think we all, when we talk about AI, they say, oh, it's a system that can learn. But it's not actually learning. It just displays learning behavior. It's like when you cram for a test. You don't know that. Like you didn't learn that stuff, right? But you can display learning behavior. You can say the things and do the things, right? That's the whole stochastic parrots paper that came out that blew everything up last year. And so I think the way you have to look at it is, if I'm just looking for patterns, then I am bound to whatever is in that data set that I saw. So if I pull a data set that's not representative, right? Not purposefully, but data often is not well distributed, right? So if I'm looking at borrowing rates for certain level of housing, well, the people who could borrow that kind of money all look kind of similar in some ways. And so I look at the patterns of what those people look like. And then I try to say, okay, a future borrower who's going to be successful looks like this. But they don't only look like that, because if they only look like that, then no one else gets an opportunity. And that's the problem. So when I am making these predictions about, well, who's going to be, successful in the future, I'm not actually looking at general patterns that make someone successful. I'm looking at, well, what made people successful in the past? So that Amazon algorithm they did for hiring was looking at Amazon's past hiring history, and they put all of those resumes together and said, okay, find out what makes a successful person at Amazon. Well, it looks like the people you got there now, right? So no Black people, no Hispanic people, no Native Americans, no women, like no older people, like nobody who you don't currently have in your data set. And so the only way that pattern matching isn't a problem is if you can get enough data to represent the entirety of the world, because then everybody will be represented within your pattern. That is impossible to do. So every single pattern you have is going to bias towards some group. Some group is always going to win and other people are going to be left out, right? And so it's not that pattern matching in itself is a problem. It's great when I'm trying to get pixels on my machine, or when you're trying to recommend me a song that I might like. Even there it gets iffy sometimes, right? Because you get into that loop. But if I'm trying to determine who's going to be good at a certain kind of job, then I can't get anyone new. If you happen to be a little Black girl in Miami who is unreasonably intelligent, you're not going to get an opportunity to get into those gifted and IB programs, right? Because all the gifted and IB programs were for people who looked a certain way. So the predictive algorithm is going to say, well, that little girl can't be there. It must be an anomaly that her score is like that, right? So that's the problem. It's not that people are actively saying, no, you little Black girl, you can't do this thing. It's saying our data doesn't show that little Black girls are going to be successful here. So I'm sorry, baby, you don't get a chance. So that's the problem with a system that is pattern matching instead of learning. It's not saying these are the criteria for success and do you meet this criteria. That's not the system we built. The system we built says this is what has been successful in the past. So you need to look like this in order to be successful in the future.
Yeah. And I want to hop in what Mashika is saying. And also just, there's two questions I saw in the Q&A that are referencing basically diversity in the work field and in the area of AI. And I always like to put this idea out here to go beyond race and gender when we talk about diversity in these fields. We also need to think about cognitive diversity. So you could have, and I was a part of a project where it was supposedly, hey, this is a really diverse group of people we have. And, there were some women, there were Hispanic, Black, whatever, but I didn't see it, that was racial diversity, gender diversity, but I didn't think it was very diverse because every single person was a computer scientist. So therefore, the outcomes we were getting, you have a certain mindset. But I've also seen the flip of that, where it was all white males, but someone was from marketing, someone was from business, someone was from government. So you might look at that room and be like, oh, this is, not diverse at all. Not, racially or gender-wise, which you do want to add that. But when you're coming from a point of like cognitive diversity, then you're going to approach how to solve problems in different ways. And that's why, to Roxana's point, when you're building these algorithms that are, say, used in schools, there should be some educators somewhere in the mix helping to determine what the data point should be. Or if it's going to be, predictive policing. One thing I like to say is just because we can doesn't mean we should. So there should be some instances, should AI even be a part of the solution, and the people in the community should be able to decide whether it is or not.
Perfect. I think this might tie into what you just talked about, but one of the questions we have are, what are paths available in the Inland Empire to become independently wealthy with an eye for protecting the public and not exploiting the public? Let's see.
Independently wealthy. We all trying to come up, right? So I think if you can't explain it to your family, if it doesn't pass that initial smell test, that should tell you something, right? If you go and say, hey, I got this system, right? And so, we're gonna take data from here and we're gonna use it to do this over there. The first question is, well, did you pay for the data? Who did you pay for the data? Did the people whose data you're using know you were going to use it for this purpose? And then, like, okay, so you're taking these people's data. Are you going to benefit them with this product you're creating, or are you only going to benefit yourself? Right? So is the wealth creation singular to you, or are you trying to build, a small business in a community? Because that focus, that singular focus on wealth and scale is a core business flaw in technology that has led us to this realm where people are actively ignoring and just pushing aside the harm that they've created. When you start reading about, the war and who Putin was 3 or 4 years ago and who he is now, it sounds an awful lot like the difference between some of our friends pre-Trump and then after, like, 2017, 2018, right? These are clear signs that people, are using social media, and it's severely damaging their understanding of the world, right? So we've got actual wars, several wars that we can point directly to Facebook, and you can't get them to change shit because there's too much money coming in. And they've made all the money they could possibly spend through several generations, but it's not enough, right? So when you focus on money for money's sake, and your goal is to just not tip too far over the line, then you're already putting yourself in a situation where you're kind of morally compromised. Your goal should be to build something that's impactful. And if it makes a lot of money, awesome. But if it makes enough for you to get by, that's sufficient. But if you go into it trying to be richy rich, then you're it's never going to be enough, right? Because you got to set new goals. And if your new goals are always around money, then you're not going to be putting yourself in a position to help the community, to help society, to build general wealth outside of yourself. You're going to exploit people. That's the mindset of the capitalist colonizer.
If I could add to the comment about wealth for wealth's sake and the capitalist mindset, is that I think that even the notion of, like, yes, we need to diversify the tech field, absolutely. And one of the things that concerns me when I hear that it's not a pipeline problem, we have great Black and brown folks who can go into these positions, but when they go into these positions, oftentimes, and this happens in academia as well, they experience a really hostile climate where if they see something that's not right and they go and they say, hey, this isn't quite right, like this isn't, and they try to speak up about it, they get, silenced or gaslit or pushed out. And we know several of examples of this that have happened, high profile cases at Google. And I'm sure, I don't know, Mashika, maybe you could speak to this, as well, but that when ethics are attempted to be addressed around what the company does, from what I understand, they're not interested because profits are going to take over the people. And so I don't know if Mashika, you wanted to add to that, or Sneha, maybe. Sneha, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just have a quick remark on that topic. So I think that, like you said, we definitely have seen, time and time again that, big companies, they try to issue these, fair AI pledges, these like AI ethics pledges, they assemble, responsible AI teams. But in reality, a lot of that is just virtue signaling. And I think that time and time again, that that false hype actually falls short. Because like you mentioned, I think we saw how Timnit Gebru was pushed out of Google, and we've seen how whistleblowers time and time again have been silenced. And I think that a lot of times we have to focus on elevating tech worker solidarity, because oftentimes those who are working at these companies, especially Black and brown workers, experience, extremely hostile environments. And, they are the ones who have an eye towards these issues and who have an eye towards, injustice and potential reports of unethical AI or algorithms that the public doesn't know about yet. And when they try to call attention to it, they're silenced and they're suppressed and they're pushed out. And so I think that we definitely have to, be encouraging solidarity among tech workers. And for those of us who are on the outside, we have to support those efforts as much as possible and, help them unionize and things like that. For example, Amazon workers were forced to sign, forms to consent to, constant biometric surveillance on the job. And that, particularly impacts, Black and brown delivery drivers for Amazon. And so I think we have to definitely support, unionization efforts. We have to be supporting tech worker solidarity and organizing efforts. And also we have to, be, elevating the voices of whistleblowers who depart from these companies and who are, casting a light on their inner workings and who are, bringing these issues to public attention. So I think we definitely have to think about that as well in the context of, what the industry needs to be doing in order to attack these issues.
I want to say one more thing. I think we have to recognize that nothing on earth is infinite. Everything is finite, right? And so when we're trying to become Jeff Bezos rich, we'll become Jeff Bezos rich unless a whole lot of other people become abjectly poor, right? You can't get there without siphoning from somewhere. So when we see this increased gap between the haves and the have-nots, it's driven by this mentality of I want to be richy rich, right? But there's enough for everyone to do really well. And some people are always going to do better than others. And we've never had a problem with that in the US. But this focus on, I need to be a billionaire, I need to basically own the GDP of a country, like that focus, we keep forgetting the downside. We worship these guys at the top because, oh, their entrepreneurial spirit and what they've done. What they've done is exploited entire countries worth of people and pulled that wealth out of their communities for themselves. And so you can give whatever philanthropy you want at that point, but that money is dirty and you can't clean it. So I think it's not just the issue of, how we handle these situations, it's how we think about money, I think has to fundamentally undergo a shift. These guys aren't heroes. They're only helping them and their friends while the rest of the world burns. I don't think that's something we should aspire to.
I'd like to add to that, if I may. Thank you so much for mentioning philanthropy, because if you look at the policy shifts that have ushered in the majority of the educational technology into schools, it has come from tech-based philanthropy foundations that have pushed the policy narratives. And we call it philanthrocapitalism because it's not just a gift. It's not gifting this use as you wish, dear community. It's a gift with an expectation that eventually it's going to lead to some profits and returns. And that's why it's called philanthrocapitalism, because there's a profit motive in the end. And this is at the back end of a lot of these public-private partnerships and the privatization that I described in my segment of the talk. I have an entire other talk that I've given on philanthrocapitalism and equity doublespeak, when innovation is exploitation and Silicon solutions fuel next level systemic racism, because they're going to come with those equity promises. And then it's going to really, if you look at it, what they're building is, not necessarily going to be helpful for the community. I think doing a lot more harms. But yeah, philanthrocapitalism is just another area to look into around this work, because they're not paying taxes. And yet they want to shape public policy. I think they should pay their taxes, like you said, Mashika, in another presentation. They just need to pay their taxes. Then let the public decide. Or go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just while we have everyone here, just in general, what people can do. Like, you don't have to be like a researcher or an AI engineer. There's so much information out on the internet. There are free courses that can be taken. So I just think with any emerging technology that's coming out, it should just, like, we should be encouraging our communities and, just amongst ourselves to at least get a foundational knowledge of how it works. And then always look at what are the harms, because the big tech companies and the researchers and the politicians control the narrative. So it's always going to be presented as, hey, this is this good thing that can happen, kind of a techno, utopianism. But there's always the underside, just like with jobs. It sounds like, oh, this is great. All these things are going to happen. But hey, there's this underclass of people doing these menial things that makes this whole thing work. So I think just being critical consumers of information and looking for the story that's not being told. And a lot of those stories, interestingly, are being told by women of color. So there are books out there are movies out there are, just things on YouTube. So I don't know if maybe like senator's office or in partnership, we can create like a database of just resources that people, it's just a central location where you can come and get this more balanced view of AI so that we can educate ourselves in our communities so we can make more informed decisions about, things that are on the ballot. And hey, like I was just at the mall, this is kind of an aside note, and it was just like, oh, give me your email. And I'm like, I'm going to skip that. Just something that simple, knowing like, I know my data is already out there, but I don't need to now give it to your company, but yeah, just things like that. This is a suggestion.
So if I can jump in real quick, we would love to partner with you on all of you amazing women and we need your information to have something like that. Propositions, who to vote for, we always try and work on that, because when you watch the television and you see one side, I always tell people, look at who it's paid for. And if you align yourself with the values of who it's paid for by, then that might be something you want to vote yes or no on, whatever they're telling you. But I also wanted to go back to what Mashika said and a little bit what you said, Aura. What do we value in society? Right now, we value status, we value stuff, and we value money. We don't value people, we don't value community, and we don't value healthcare. And I've always said that until we change that narrative in society, it's just going to continue to be a real struggle. I could talk for days about the Jeff Bezos of the world. I was in the labor movement for 20 years before I ran for the Senate. And you have a moral obligation when you make that kind of money to do right in this world. And if you are not willing to do that, you don't deserve that money. And I think, Mashika, you were saying that, they're entrepreneurs or whatnot. Well, great, you got lucky too. Not everybody gets lucky. So again, I could talk for days about that, but I think it is really important that we do recognize that unfortunately in society, we value money, status, and stuff, and we've got to change that narrative.
Thank you, Senator Leva, for that input. I think we could all agree and stand by what you have to say on that. Real quick, I want to get this last question in, and then we're gonna start moving into our closing. I noticed there was a lot of questions about, like I said, diversity that was brought up, and like I said, talking about what is the effective way, what is the best way if we're talking about inclusion and diversity moving forward. What is the best way to continue to utilize AI, the future of AI?
I think a lot of the discussion about inclusion and diversity is specific to tech companies, right? People are just trying to get more folks who look like us working in these spaces. But tech companies they sell hammers, right? They're just a company that sells a hammer. A hammer is a tool that you then take and use, for whatever your purposes are, right? The hammer either works for your purposes or it doesn't work for your purpose, right? So we've glorified a tool maker as, something more than what it is. So I think when it comes to diversity around AI, we shouldn't be looking to the tech companies to set the direction. So I think, we're using AI in government. Well, why can't we send some of our, or have some of our, pipeline of software developers and people in that space work in our governments, right? To make sure that they're building systems that work for us in the government and that they're, buying systems that work for us in the government. We use AI in healthcare, right? Who in healthcare understands AI? Why can't you go and work, for a health system and be a part of making sure that they are buying? Because the reason why these companies are so big and they've made so much money is because they can sell stuff and nobody feels empowered to tell them no, or to tell them this doesn't work for me in this way. Everybody has FOMO. Nobody wants to go without the AI system. But I think if you get learned people, intelligent people in different areas, we've got Black people all through education and healthcare, right? So, but when it comes to software development, we're trying to fit all of our square pegs into these like 6 round holes. It's not going to work. So if we focus on where the AI is being used, where the AI is being built outside of big tech, flood those systems with us, right? Then when you try to sell us stuff that doesn't work, we can say, no, I'm not, that doesn't work for us. No, that's no good for my community. You need to go back and do that again. It's about having a voice of power in these discussions. And as Dr. Marachi and Sneha mentioned, when we work in these tech companies, we don't have a lot of power. And if we try to exercise our power, we get run out, right? And so instead of sending more of us to the firing squad, because we feel like if you're not at that table, you don't have a voice, why don't we just flood all the other tables, right? So when they come over serving, I don't want that at my table, right? So find a position of power that doesn't have to be in that 2%, they're not gonna let us in. It's just not gonna happen. And those of us who get there get just destroyed before we can get out. So stop sending our kids, sending our family and friends to the firing squad, and empower ourselves within these outside systems where we can really make a difference. That's how I would address it.
So I think, does someone else want to speak? I'm sorry. Good.
You can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sarah. I was just going to say there was a question about legislation, and I know we're not going to get into specific bills. I just wanted to say generally, one of the things I think we need to do, the folks who are following legislation, is to recognize how much doublespeak there is in the titles of bills, where it might sound like a really good thing, right? Student protection, privacy protection bill, or whatever it might, might sound like. You need to look at who's the co-sponsor, who's sponsoring it. And if it's going to be a tech company, you need to really read the fine print to see where the loophole might be. If they're actually interested in student privacy, or if they're interested in something that looks like a student, privacy bill, but that actually has this big gaping vault open to be able to take the data and do what they want with it. So I've a lot of legislation that I've read that on the surface I'm excited about because it sounds good. I see serious red flags. And again, so I would suggest also anything that comes with solutions, you have to ask yourself, is this a tech-mediated solution? Dyslexia risk legislation last year sailed through one level of the House, and then people started to wake up and say, wait, what's going on here? And there was concern about it because we noticed that there was going to be these backdoor, apps and eye tracking, facial recognition kind of things that would sail through unless there were guardrails. It ended up getting stopped, but I worry that there's a new bill that's going to be coming out around dyslexia risk screeners. So that's one to watch. And, if we want to be able to diagnose students and get support services, great, wonderful, but not these little mini itty bitty screeners that are just going to take massive amounts of data on every single student and then put it into a data set and do predictive analytics on them. So it's complex in terms of the legislative agendas. The only thing I will add as well, given there have been so many bills that have been introduced across the nation right now around the entry of blockchain digital ID systems, I think we need to be vigilant about that. I haven't looked at the legislative slate of bills that are proposed, but we need to do a keyword search and look under, digital identity, passports, blockchain, all the aliases to ensure that if there is something being pushed or promoted, that we really peel back the layers and understand what it is, because it's going to come with really good marketing. Whatever it is that's going to be harmful. I believe strongly that these companies are expert at marketing and they're going to make us want it. So that's my recommendation for the legislation. And I wish I had more time to analyze it myself, but I'm just trying to go day to day and teach my classes and get some sleep. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to be said. Like for clauses in legislation that allows companies to use the data for commercial purposes, big red flag. Thank you, Mashika. Exactly. All right, I'll stop now. Thank you.
Okay, so I know we actually have a wealth of questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. We're going to try to do some follow with our follow-up emails. We'll get that situated and figured out. Be on the lookout for that information. But I want to allow space for Ms. Brown, NAACP, Pomona Valley branch to talk about what's next and next steps.
Thank you, Robert. Now that you have heard all that AI is impacting our community, we ask you, let's join together and assist in the leaders to protecting our personal information. In the same way we asked for and got regulations to ensure our manufacturers to build safer cars, we can do the same. We can do that. And I'm here asking for you to join our coalition. We meet every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of the month at about 6 p.m. And we would like for you to look forward to our emails and any information that it relates to artificial intelligence. I hope you'll be willing to join us and make the change that we want to see the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. And then we're going to pass it over to Senator Connie Leyva to close for our closing word, and then we'll go ahead and get on out of here.
Thank you, Robert. And again, thank you, COPE. Thank you, NAACP Pomona Branch, Inland Empire Concerned African American Churches. But most of all, thank you to the amazing women who shared their insights, data, facts. We have a lot to do. And as all of you can see, this is why we wanted to do this and partner with everyone. There is so much out there. There are so many questions. We could literally talk about this for hours. So let's keep it going. Yolanda, thank you for the invitation. And just really thank you to all of you for being here and being interested. We have a lot of work to do, but I always say that when we work together, we win together. So thank you all. Keep up the great work, and whatever you need from Team Leyva, give us a call. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.
Beautiful,
Thank you.
beautiful people. Thank you all for being here. For, like I said, all of our partners, Senator Connie Leyva, NAACP, ICAC. Thank you all for your time. Everyone who came here to participate and engage and be a part of tonight's event. Thank you for taking the time, allowing us to take a couple of hours and some change out of your evening. We really appreciate it. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up email from all of us to provide some resources. Any of the questions that we did not answer, they're going to be answered in those emails as well. So, and any other follow-up that you can be on the lookout for. So again, thank you all for being here this evening, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Thank you.
Good night.